Well, baby, I'm on it with a bottle of wine and an old dirt road. Are you ready to go? Hey, thanks everybody for joining us today on Live Music Nation podcast. I'm your host, Jake Gill. Today's segment, Performance Theaters Across the Midwest. I'm with Thomas Hensel, Elgin Community College.
Jake, not hearing anything.
Check 1 2 2 1. Check 1 1.
Oh, there you are.
Let me make sure we're still good. Still good?
Yep.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today on Live Music Nation podcast. I'm your host, Jake Gill. Today's special theater and performance venues across the Midwest. I'm with Thomas Hensel from Elgin. Is it Elgin or Elgin?
It's Elgin.
Elgin Community College. Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thomas, give us a little background on you. Where did you grow up? And give us your career transformation from eearly adulthood to where you're at now.
That's baby, I'm on it with a bottle of wine and an old dirt road. Are you ready to go? That was a long time ago. I did my undergrad at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, in music. And then I went back to the University of South Carolina for my master's degree in theater. So my early career, like when I was still in college, was working summer stock theater. I was doing acting and some directing. But my internship for my master's degree was at the Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C. So I became really fascinated by the works of Shakespeare. So my first major gig out of grad school was to be the founding artistic director of a Shakespeare festival in Pennsylvania. So for a number of years, I directed primarily big outdoor Shakespeare kind of performances. And then my career sort of did what many people's careers do. You go from theater to theater and you gig and cobble together your life. I took a little side trip outside of theater for a few years, worked in the holistic health industry. It's a long story, but decided that I just couldn't not be performing anymore. So in the late 1990s, I went back into the theater again, and I got a gig running a theater in New Hampshire. That was the first time that I was working somewhere that produced shows, but also presented performances. So it was my first intersection with the touring performing arts world. And I had that job for several years, and then got a job in the Chicago area at a community college called Moraine Valley Community College, which is in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. And I was there for 14 years. And just this February, 10 months ago, I left that gig and came over here to Elgin Community College, which is in the northwest suburbs of Chicago.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your theater there. Tell us about your theater, and then what types of performances do you guys host?
So we have two theater spaces. The primary one that we use for the touring shows is a 700-seat proscenium theater. We also have a black box theater that seats maybe 150, depending on how it's configured. And we're celebrating a 30th anniversary next year. So, what's really interesting is that I would say there's about 6 or 7 theaters like mine in community colleges surrounding Chicago that were all built within the 2 or 3 year period in the late 60s. So we're all celebrating the colleges were founded, but then the theaters were all built in the 90s. So most of us are celebrating a 30th anniversary within 2 or 3 years of each other. But we present, really it's more of a multidisciplinary kind of thing. We present a little bit of everything, mainly music. Who's
your major ticket buyer? The community, the student? Who's your ticket buyer?
It's the community. The most community colleges, at least here in Illinois, have this public-facing piece where we need to serve the needs of the community at the same time that we're serving the needs of the students. So the theater, we obviously have a lot of academic stuff going on, but the actual professional touring shows are really faced out towards the community.
Great. Do you also teach at the college?
I do not teach here yet. I did teach at my former college occasionally, humanities and theater. I'm hoping here that I'll be able to pick up a gig occasionally, but really what I would love to do is direct something for the academic theater department. That directing is my sort of first love.
Yeah, no, for sure. Very good. What do you love the most about being in that position that you're in for the past 14 years?
You know, what I love is I love being able to go out, well, pre-pandemic, when we could go out and see performances and go to these booking conferences like APAP in New York in January, but to see so many different kinds of performers. And what I love is being able to sort of browse through all of that and curate really interesting things for the community that sometimes I feel like are things they might never see anywhere else. Certain types of music or performers that are up and coming that I think are eventually going to be famous, and it's great to get them before they're costing $100,000 for a performance.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Very good. All right, a couple fun questions here. What's the best show you've ever seen your entire life?
I had to struggle over this question because I've seen so many great shows. I'm going to give you two answers. One are shows I have presented. There are two performers in my career as a presenter that totally stand out to me, and they're going to probably surprise people who listen to this. One is Chita Rivera, who kicked it out of the park. It was probably one of the best shows that I've ever seen anywhere. And the other, don't laugh, Charo.
Oh, very good.
Charo is amazing. Now, for me, not presenting, I have to go back to like a first. In the 80s, I went to New York City for the very first time and got a ticket to a Broadway show. My very first Broadway show was a musical called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And because it was my first Broadway musical, I think that one always stands out in my head as just an amazing experience.
No, that makes good sense. Okay, dead or alive, you could bring one musical act to your theater. Who would you bring?
Oh, it's hard because I had two, but if I had to pick one, I would say Ella Fitzgerald.
Ooh, wow, yeah.
I think she was the best song interpreter in the 20th century. She was amazing.
That's fantastic. Very good. Thomas Hensel, thank you for joining us so much today on Live Music Nation. Thank you for what you do.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Well, baby, I'm on it with a bottle of